If you're learning UX, you might have been taught one specific process. Research, personas, user flows, wireframes, testing. And whereas that's good, you might have come away thinking this is how every project's supposed to go. And that logic is seriously flawed. Today I'm going to walk you through a real project and show you exactly what I did, what I didn't do, and why. Hi, I'm Vic. I'm a UX designer and founder of She's Working On It, and I'm inviting you today to sit with me while I walk you through a real UX project where I just happen to be the client. I'm launching a one-to-one design mentoring service and portfolio review service from scratch. Nothing's in place at the start of this project, so we're going from zero to having something live and ready for clients to book onto. And we have some constraints. It's got to be a low code or no code solution, because there's no developers, there's just me. And because of the phase that my business is in, and we're testing this out to see if it's a viable service, we're looking at low setup costs and low running costs, and we're going to be relying mostly on third-party services to make it all work. So come along with me and I'm going to walk you through it. Okay, so welcome to Miro. This is the base of operations for my project. And you might be thinking, hang on, this isn't what I expected. This doesn't look like a typical UX project. I don't see a user persona or an empathy map or, any of those kind of things. And I'm here to talk to you today about why not all UX processes look the same project to project. And that's because although we might be taught traditionally that there's a certain recipe or a routine of methodologies that we go through, it's just not the case in the real world. You're going to start at different starting points in a project. You're not starting from fresh and redesigning something from scratch every time. You're not always inventing something completely new out of thin air with no knowledge. Sometimes you're starting in the messy middle or near the end. And so it would be not very commercially aware to just blindly apply a set arbitrary process to something and hope that that's going to solve the problem of what you're trying to solve in the project, to come up with a solution, to come up with a finished design. What's more commercially aware is to look at your toolkit as a designer and apply what makes the most sense, what's going to get you the answers to the questions that you need to know in order to come up with the finished solution. And so for me, that's what this looked like. As you can see, I've got my brief, I've got some notes on audience, I've got some notes on risks and assumptions, and also got MVP scope, I've got a decision log, some success metrics, and I guess the juiciest part of the board is my service blueprint. We'll get on to that, but let's dive into the brief because that is the perfect place to start. So this is the project. We're going to design and launch an MVP mentoring offer using a lean, no-code stack that can be built and launched within a 1-week sprint. That is what I wrote. That definitely did not happen. Okay, so the objectives are to launch a simple and reliable mentoring service. And we're going to keep costs low. It has to be professional and trustworthy. And it needs to be a foundation that can grow over time without requiring a complete rebuild. If I want to add more services to it, it should have some flexibility that it can accommodate that. Moving on to the scope, I've got some bullet points here on user experience. Things like being able to understand it clearly, being able to make a decision easily, book easily. I want confirmation and reminder emails. That was really important. Obviously, we're going to need a landing page. I've got here that I wanted to have multi-session mentoring packages if it's practical for the MVP. And these are questions because we're relying on third-party tools to make this happen. So we won't know the answer to this until we get further into the project. And I'm going to be launching with Async portfolio reviews. So that is a review where it's not live. I get sent a portfolio and I can review it, and then I send back a video recording and a PDF checklist to the client that they can absorb in their own time and action in their own time. And so it's not required to have a one-on-one booking slot, which is asynchronous. In terms of pricing, I've got some considerations. I've got some success criteria, and that's the brief. Okay, so we're moving on to the juicy part of the board now, and this is the service blueprint. So looking at it, you can see it's a bit of a hybrid asset. So it's a little bit like a journey map or a customer flow, and it encompasses both parts of the service. So we've got the one-to-one booking along the top, and we've got the async portfolio review bookings going along the bottom. And not only does it show the flow of how the service works, we've also got all the moving parts for how each step or each phase of the service will work, how it will run, what we need to build it, considerations we need in terms of things like communication, decisions that we need to make, basically implementation and tasks relating to each part. So not only can we see a map of what the service looks like, we can also see, as the designer, and because it's no code, I'm the builder, what I need to do to make each part live. So if we look at one for an example, the one-to-one booking, I started off thinking, right, how will the customer find me? Most likely YouTube description. So we're going to follow a link and make a booking. So we need a way for them to pick a slot. So we're looking at something like Calendly, which is a calendar booking system. I don't have anything set up to take payment, so that's going to be a requirement. And at the start, I think this said payment gateway, but we made a decision that it was going to be Stripe, and so Stripe went in here. We're going to need to take some details from the client before they make the booking. So we're going to need a form. Where, how's that going to work? So it goes into here so that we know these are all the things that we need to solve. And as I solved them, they went from the orange stickies to green stickies, and once they were built, they got ticks. And so at a glance, we could see where we were with the project. And when I say we, I mean me, but you're riding along with me on this one. So we can see where we are in the project and what needs to be done next. And so every part of each step has been considered so that we don't launch into making the thing and end up missing important things. It's going to take much longer. It's going to be more wasteful. We're going to get into tangles, and it's not going to be a very good experience. So this is worth its weight in gold to plan out a project in this way, in a blueprint way, or have your customer flows and your journey maps. They are so valuable to have. But again, it's about picking the asset that makes most sense to solve the problem. And my problem here was, not only do I have to figure out how this whole thing works, but I also figure out how I'm going to actually make it myself. And that's what this answers. All this and not a single piece of visual design so far, and yet we're quite a way into the project. UX design is so much more than visual design. It's so much more than UI. And as you can see so far, if we'd have jumped straight into how a page looks, like say we jumped into the landing page, we wouldn't know what it needed to communicate, what its purpose was. If we started the page for the booking page for the calendar, like, did we even need to design that? Because at the end of the day, I used Calendly, so they took care of that and I didn't have to design anything. Starting with visual design and UI is not really a solid UX process. It's all about the thinking and a lot of thinking and planning, actually, especially for this project. Once I got enough mapped out and enough decisions locked in, it was time to build the thing. So actually this didn't look like heading to Figma and designing. That wasn't what this was about. This involved things like setting up Calendly, setting up MailerLite, setting up the digital product, which is the Async portfolio review, as something that could be purchased. Setting up all the connections that spoke from say Calendly to MailerLite so the emails would be automated, where Calendly's own automations didn't suffice, connecting payment providers, Stripe, into those things. There was also things like setting up the Google Forms for the reviews that I wanted to collect. That was an important step, and making sure those kind of things were on brand. So now everything was set up and it felt like I'd gone through everything methodically and gone through all the settings for each piece of software, customized everything, hooked everything up. It was time to test before moving on to the landing page. Landing page will be next, like bringing it all together, but it was important to test, do some test bookings really, see how it was like from the customer's side, and see what came through on my side, to check everything was as expected. Was it clear? Did it make sense? Did all the links work? Was the customer notified appropriately? Was they reminded appropriately? Did everything make it through to their inbox okay? And then on my side, was it clear that a booking had been made? Did it make it into my calendar correctly? All that kind of stuff. And things broke. things broke quite wildly actually, and to the point where it felt like I needed a rethink. Everything was set up and working beautifully until I made the test purchase and saw an unexpected notification email that came through on the customer side, and it was like an extra notification about their order. And because I was sort of piggybacking onto some functionality on their end, which was selling a digital product, but it's not a digital product, it's a service. It was expecting a download link, and I'd set it up to arrive at a landing page after purchase that explained like what the next steps were, as in like, thank you for submitting all your details, I've got everything I need, this is what happens next, I'll be in touch within a few business days, and this is what you'll receive, and if you have any questions, here's how to get in touch. Whereas with a digital product, in their intended use of the feature, would be here's a link in an email to download that resource, like a PDF or something like that. But that isn't what I'd set up. It didn't feel like there was anything out there that was made for what I was setting up, so I was kind of hacking it a little bit to make it work. Aside from that, I had a Stripe receipt going out and a beautifully designed automated email with those next steps in as well. But then this unexpected email just came through, and it was so confusing because it was like, your portfolio review is ready, download it here. And I was like, no, it's not ready to download. I've just sent them to a page and sent them an email saying it'll be ready in 5 days. So this was confusing, would have broken trust, probably caused emails to come through with questions, which is not what I wanted. I wanted to keep admin down. I didn't want to confuse my clients who have trusted in me with this purchase. So it was an absolute non-negotiable that this email just could not exist in its form, and it seemed that I couldn't turn it off. So at that point, I then went launching off into an investigation of, right, I must have this part of the service provided elsewhere. And so that was a bit of a delay in the project, more investigation, more trialing of other services. One of the key points for the user experience and the way that the service worked for the async portfolio reviews as well is that information had to be collected before payment was made. Like, the purchase was conditional on the user supplying certain information. So I needed to obviously have their email address and their name, but I needed to have their portfolio link, and I had a few sort of context questions about what they're struggling most with their portfolio at the moment, and what kind of clients or roles were they aiming for, just so that I had everything I needed to know to help them the best that I could while I was reviewing their portfolio. And so it wasn't an option to take payment and have a separate form maybe be triggered in an email or via link on the success page, which would have been a workaround, a valid one. However, you're risking failure to complete the whole process then. You would have definitely a percentage of customers who would complete one part and not the other, and then you would have payment but no way of fulfilling the order, and then that would be admin chasing, and then lack of confidence from their side because they've placed an order, they're expecting to receive something and they weren't maybe aware that they haven't completed the process. You have to make everything really clear and infallible basically. And then everywhere I was looking for an alternative just didn't seem to have that conditional form beforehand, or required sort of another 2 tools to bolt together in order to make it work. Or I would find something that was what I wanted, but really it was stretching the budget on the project, and I already had like several tools in place that were going to require ongoing costs. And if you remember back in the brief, one of the criteria for the project was to keep setup costs low and running costs low. And it's an MVP, and we don't know if this is going to work, if this is going to be a viable service. We are testing it, we're putting it out in the wild to test, so that wasn't an option. What happened next was I went back to MailerLite, where this rogue email was mandatory, and figured out how we could keep it in and still make sense, not confuse the client, the end user, and that it didn't seem that they were being inundated with duplicate emails. That was something else that wasn't desirable. And it seemed that this particular email that was being fired off was a generic email for any order that would go through my, I guess consider it like the store within MailerLite. So you can add more products as you go, and I do plan on, you know, having other services and other products. So this email would fire off no matter what they purchased, so it couldn't be specifically customized to be that the replacement for the automated email I'd already made. That option, no good. So I had to make it be this standard, like, thank you for your order email, which is not 100% ideal because I already had the Stripe receipt and I had an order confirmation one with the next steps, but this one was a third one that basically confirms that payment has been made and that another email will come through shortly with more details about their order. And is it perfect? No. Is it confusing? No. But is it good enough for the MVP? Yes. I'm happy with it as it is. And when you're working with third-party tools, there's going to be these limitations. Ultimately, I think we got there in the end, and it's all working now. And finally, when it was all working, it meant that I could jump into design for the landing page. So that is going to bring everything together in one place, and this is where we start to see the product coming to life, because this is the first glimpse of how it's going to look to the outside world. It's going to be the doorway to users coming from the audience to hopefully booking a service, booking a session with me, or booking a portfolio review, which is really exciting. And we can design the language and the tone and how it looks and how we present the information. And so this is more of, I guess, stuff that's more in our control for once. We're working within constraints left, right and centre for most of the project so far, and now we have more control. So let's jump into Framer for this one, and I'll show you around what I made. So we're in Framer now, and this is where I built the whole page, and there are some pages leading off it. I guess you could call it a website. It's a single page website. For me, it's more of a landing page plus, but I guess for all intents and purposes, it's just a very, very small website. You might be asking, why did I just jump straight into Framer? Why haven't I designed this out in Figma first? It's a good question. But for me, the UI and the page design was probably the least important part of the project. And I know that sounds harsh, but when you think about it, this page could have been so simple. I mean, it could have been a Google Doc, you know? All it needed to do was explain what the service was, who it fit, and how to book, and a button to book or a link to book. So the task of the project itself wasn't really to design a beautiful page, although I am happy with how it turned out. This was more a functional part of the project. It needed to exist. There needed to be a shop front, and so I didn't feel it was important to have a lengthy UI process where I maybe worked out a wireframe, I already had an idea in my head, and there's just me on the team. I don't need to get stakeholder buy-in because I am the only stakeholder. I didn't need to create lo-fi or mid or high fidelity stuff to share and collaborate on because, again, just me. So for this process and this project, it was totally fine to jump straight into the end tool, which is both a design and build tool. It saved time, it was an easy workflow for me, and therefore it fits. And as we've discussed previously in this video, it's about finding what fits for the project you're working on. And in this case, the fact that I'm working alone allowed me to do this. But it might not if you're working in a team, or it might not if you're having to share with a client. It might be quicker for you to design in Figma first, whip something up in there and share that with a client before you spend a lot of time in a tool like Framer or similar. And that's why you would do that. But I didn't need to take that into consideration, so that's why we're in Framer. And yeah, I am really happy with how it turned out. I got to play with some more branding visuals and bringing more of that into my business, which I haven't done as much yet. It was great that once the desktop design was locked in, that there wasn't a whole lot of work to make the site responsive. And I was in a position then where I could just publish and go live if I wanted to. Considering that there was so much work put into the project to make the features behind these buttons work, it was great that this part wasn't the thing that took the longest. And I think when it comes to visual design, you definitely could sink a lot of time into this part of the work, more out of enjoyment and striving for perfection, I guess. But even though I am really happy with how it looks and I really do enjoy the design of it, could it be better? Absolutely. Could it be more exciting? There aren't even any transition animations or micro interactions really on it. And I refrained from that. I wanted to get it done not as quickly as possible, but let's be sensible so that we can actually launch the service rather than play with this. So yeah, it was ready to go live, and I can show you the live site. And the page that I've built, it doesn't actually do everything because it doesn't need to do everything, because I can rely on Calendly for the one-to-one design mentoring booking, which it handles beautifully. I don't need to build that from scratch. Why would I? I can have it as part of the experience. Yes, it's not completely within brand and completely seamless, but I think that the experience does feel cohesive, and same for MailerLite as well. Yes, I could have spent more time and maybe integrated this into a page, but for the purpose of the MVP, I think this provides a really solid experience. So this is an intentional part of the project and comes from the constraints set out initially in the brief. The UX can span multiple platforms, even though the user experiences it as one service. So that's the project. Think of all the things you didn't see. We didn't see a user persona, there wasn't any empathy mapping, there wasn't any card sorting, we didn't do usability testing with participants, there wasn't wireframes or a big Figma file, and there wasn't a developer handoff. And yet the entire project was UX. It was a UX design project. If this way of thinking about UX was useful for you and you're looking to develop this kind of judgment in your own work, this is exactly the kind of thing you can bring to a one-to-one mentoring session with me. Everything I've ran through today is live now on the website. The one-to-one design mentoring sessions and the Async portfolio reviews are all live and ready to book. I'm going to leave a link to my website in the description if you want to find out more. Thanks for sitting with me while I talked you through this one. I hope it gave you good insight into what a UX project can look like in real practice, and I hope to see you in the next video.